Welcome to the Artistry and Life podcast, Navigating Towards Happiness. I'm your host, Ray, and with me, I have life practitioner and coach, Marking. What's going on, Marking?
I'm doing great, bro. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm getting better and better at this intro.
Like you were meant to do it, bro.
I think we could just stop. Thank you for watching the show. We're out of here.
That's it. That's it.
All right, man. So in today's podcast, we're going to summarize what we went over with ego and higher self and the whole mindset framework. Is that correct?
Yeah. We'll review what we went over last episode in regards to ego, inflamed ego, higher self, and providing that context to give better insight on understanding mindset.
Cool. But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And as Mark would say,
You'd also would love for you guys to share. So please share, and that would be outstanding. Very much appreciated.
All right, let's go over ego and higher self and the framework of the mindset.
Yes. Okay. So ego, what we talked about in the last episode is what ego is in this framework. So ego, as we understand it, there are four very important aspects that you get to understand about ego. One is that ego is how we identify in the moment, right? It's everything from the worst versions of who we are all the way to the highest versions of who we are and everything in between. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that we get to know about ego. The second thing we get to know about ego is that ego's primary directive is to keep us safe. Now, if we know that ego's primary directive is to keep us safe, we now also know that it's fear-based, and that's number three, that we're operating from a place of fear. The fourth thing that we get to understand about ego is that it is responsible for our fight, flight, and freeze responses. Okay. So that's what ego is that we get to understand within the context of the framework. Now, what we also did is we took ego and we divided it into two categories: inflamed ego and higher self. Inflamed ego is how we identify in that moment. Ego plus some sort of level of stress equals inflamed ego. Okay. And when we're experiencing inflamed ego, there's typically a negative energy around that. So it's a really good indication. If we're feeling something in our ways of being that's negative, it's a good indication that we're experiencing an inflamed ego. And when we're in an inflamed ego, we're also in crisis and survival mode. And when we're in crisis and survival mode, we're not very thoughtful about our responses. We're not very mindful about our responses. We're more in a reactive or reactionary state of being. And when you're in reactive state of being, then it's taking you out of the moment. You're thinking about the what if situations. What if this happens? What if that happens? Right?
Yep.
So that's inflamed ego. Higher self is how we identify in that moment, but it's rooted in love and compassion. And when it's rooted in love and compassion, it usually has a positive feeling. So again, that's another good indicator. If I'm experiencing something that feels more neutral or positive, that's a good indication that I'm operating from my higher self. Now, when you are operating from a place of love and compassion, you are now more thoughtful, mindful, and heartful about your responses. And when you're more thoughtful, mindful, and heartful about your responses, you now have responsibility, the ability to respond. You're taking ownership in your responses in what you say or do or think, right? And that keeps you in the moment because you are being mindful, you're being thoughtful. You're thinking about the situation. You're understanding. I'm in a safe place. Let me move forward as it relates to my love and compassion and how I'm viewing the situation. And that's your higher self. So we have higher self and you have inflamed ego. In understanding that, you now have an understanding of where the thoughts and voices are coming from that are in our heads. They're either our inflamed ego, they're coming from our inflamed ego, or they're coming from our higher self. That's a very powerful bit of information that you now have. Because when you have that information, you now can make a very powerful and impactful choice in how you want to move forward. Am I going to listen to the voices of my inflamed ego, or am I going to listen to my higher self? That's the huge nugget right there that we get to now apply within that framework in understanding to a deeper level our mindset, right? Meaning our self-talk, our energy, our language. Having that bit of information about ego informs the rest of understanding mindset.
So it kind of allows us to make better decisions on a daily and for goals that are out in the future.
Out in the future, if they're big goals or big decisions that you get to make, or even on an everyday situation where you're making decisions, throughout your day.
And that's kind of like what we call our North Star. That's navigating towards happiness is basically navigating towards our North Star.
Exactly. So in understanding at a deeper level now what ego is, and understanding the sources of the voices in our heads, whether it's an inflamed ego or our higher self, as it relates to your North Star, that's a very key component. Now you have a better understanding of what your North Star can look like. And sometimes it may even shift what your North Star may look like, because you have this new bit of information, which is, again, a huge nugget in helping to define what your North Star may look like, maybe even more precisely what your North Star can look like.
Got it. I go back to, I seen a video on TikTok, I think it was TikTok, where this woman had pushed a bear off a fence that was going after her dogs.
Right. I saw that video.
Yeah.
I saw that video.
I hope everybody, maybe we'll post it and link it on the bottom, but I think that's a great example of ego kicking in. All that stuff, inflamed ego, fear, all that stuff. Like, what do I do? She literally pushed that bear off the fence so it wouldn't maul the dogs.
Exactly. So that's a perfect example how your ego, as we know it, right, plus some sort of level of stress equals an inflamed ego. So that means that this fight or flight freeze, or this the primary directive of keeping us safe and our fear, that all kicks up like a huge few notches, because you're in reaction mode. You're in crisis and survival mode. You don't have time to think about a situation. You're just reacting.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a great example of how your ego is can be inflamed. That's an extreme example of an inflamed ego, but an example of inflamed ego nonetheless.
Yeah, it definitely puts you in that moment.
Yes.
That's like if you see a bully coming from across the schoolyard, you're already in that mode of like fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And if I was listening to my higher voice, that, what does that tell me if I see a bully coming? I may just avoid it altogether and just, I don't want this stress. I'm just going to try to avoid it.
Well, more importantly, because you now have this framework, you can now understand where the sources of the thoughts and voices that you're feeling, or the energy that you're feeling. If it's a negative energy, it's that's my inflamed ego.
Yeah.
That gives me an opportunity, because now I'm being conscious about it. I'm starting to recognize for myself that, I start to ask myself the questions like, if I'm operating from my inflamed ego, am I really in danger? Or is this just a fear that I'm making up for myself? Or is it, or just, even if it's just an inflamed ego? So if I'm recognizing that, then I can check in, reassure myself that I'm safe, because there's no tiger that's going to jump out and kill me. I'm not going to die from the situation. Okay, I'm actually really safe. See, now you're starting to turn down the volume of your inflamed ego and moving slowly into your higher self, because now you have recognition of like, oh, I have this other voice I can start to listen to. How could I reframe to reclaim, like using one of those tools? To now I'm operating from my higher self. How can I be more thoughtful about the situation? How can I be more mindful? How can I take responsibility for how I'm going to respond?
Yeah.
And that starts to move you into your higher self. And you can use that in any situation.
It's interesting you say that, because when we were talking about a bully, bullies could be in adulthood. Like, bullies as an adult. So as your higher self, you could hear your inner voice turned up. What would your higher self tell you about a bully? I mean, what kind of example is that?
Here's an example of one of the ways you may approach it. if you're operating from a love and compassion, maybe you start to view that situation for the bullies like, I understand where this person is coming from. How do I approach that situation where it's more in my alignment? Maybe that affects how I communicate with that person, or it may even affect it, or the decision may be, okay, I understand where this person is coming from. I might have a hard time communicating with this person. Then maybe I just avoid the situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's what your higher self is telling you, not the fight, flight, or freeze scenario.
Right. And again, more importantly, you're getting a better understanding how you're responding. You're being more conscious as opposed to reacting.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're being that conscious, then, with the other tools that you're able to use within that framework, within the context of that framework, you can start to now tailor it where it's happening more from your higher self as opposed to a reactionary survival crisis mode type of situation.
Got it. Definitely. Just so the audience knows that you can listen to our previous podcast regarding ego and higher self, and also mindset, which is, I believe, episode 2 and 3.
Yes,
definitely.
And then, you can even listen to the other episodes as it pertains to the North Star. The other thing that I wanted to illustrate as well is, now that you have this concept of the framework and really have a deeper understanding of how ego works, that it's either your inflamed ego or your higher self that you can choose to operate from, then that gives you a better insight on how your happiness is dictated. It gives you more power in how you move towards happiness, as opposed to allowing externals to really dictate your happiness. Right?
Got it. Yeah.
If you're operating from this perspective, you now realize, wow, I actually have control of my happiness based on my mindset and how I approach things, how I think about things. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to start to put that in practice, then you will start to be more efficient and effective in getting and navigating towards happiness and finding that more ease, flow, and grace in your ways of being.
I know you mentioned to me before that you would have stage fright.
Yes.
Even today. Can you give us an example of when you have stage fright and how you could use this practice to help you with that stage fright?
Absolutely, 100%. So to give it a little bit more context, we talked about my spelling bee incident, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I got really emotionally scarred from that, and that showed up as I understood when I started to take a look at that at a deeper level, especially with the framework. I could start to draw a line in how that has affected me with performance anxiety, from all the way from 3rd grade up into current day versions of myself. So there's the context. Yesterday, I was actually asked to be host for an open mic. And what I had noticed for myself in that situation is that in previous times when people would ask me to be up on stage or host, I would feel some sort of negative energy. This time around, I felt a little bit of that negative energy. It wasn't as pronounced, but I still felt it. So when I felt it, I was like, this is a negative energy that I'm experiencing. Is that my inflamed ego? It's my ego plus a little bit of stress that I'm holding it as a little bit of stress. I'm operating from crisis mode, survival mode, and just reacting. What I did in that moment was, okay, I assessed that. I want to operate from a place of my higher self. How can I reframe that situation of where I'm like, okay, these feelings of like, am I going to fall flat on my face? Am I gonna sound good enough, or I'm going to be good enough to host? What I started to do is turn down the volume in that and listen to my higher self by reframing to reclaim the situation and holding it from a place of love and compassion for myself. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, the dialogue was, wow, this is actually a great opportunity for me to expand and grow. It's a great opportunity for me to fail and get back up. This is an opportunity to really influence my happiness. I have that power. So now I'm starting to turn up the volume of my higher self. And when I started to listen more from that perspective and how I was going to move forward, it really allowed me to just be more in the moment and just have fun, because I took all the pressure off of myself, because I wasn't operating from my inflamed ego. I was operating more from my higher self. And that was me being conscious of the thoughts and voices and understanding the sources of where that's coming from. And that would be an example of my inflamed ego and my higher self, listening to those voices and making a impactful and powerful decision on how and what I want to listen to in my response, in what I say, do, or think about next.
Got it. And is that part of your North Star? Getting into an audience and being comfortable in front of an audience?
Yes. Well, let me say that my part of what my North Star is to have be more effective and efficient in my ways of being, stress-free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Providing myself freedom to be in flow and in grace and being in harmony, and being able to be up on stage without having resistance. That's an exercise in me, and being in alignment with my North Star and my mission statement.
So that's basically you practicing what you're preaching every day.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Because it is a practice. Being conscious about what we think about and what we say and what we do is a practice. And it requires effort. It requires work. What I'm attempting to do for myself is reprogramming all this old programming that I had before. And it took decades, for that old programming to become habitual or routine. So me being conscious about that and shifting my ways of being, because if I'd continued down that path of operating from old programming, that would affect my happiness. My happiness, I want it to be expanding, right?
Got it.
So I get to empower myself and make a different choice. Am I going to listen moving forward now? Am I going to listen to my inflamed ego, or am I going to listen to my higher self?
That brings me back to, I think we had the discussion about dealing with a boss at your 9-to-5 job. And, you really like your job, you're happy there. But then one day your boss drops 25 files on your desk and says, I need this by 5:30. And you've had a previous engagement set weeks ago. And having to deal with that, like your ego, your higher self, all the tools within the framework, self-talk, communication, right? All that stuff. So how would one kind of deal with that to reframe it, to reclaim it?
Well, again, now that you have this bit of information, you get to identify what are the feelings that I'm experiencing right now. Is it a negative or positive feeling? In that particular scenario, there's a negative feeling. So then I get to reassure myself, downregulate my heart rate, and operate from a place of my higher self, start turning the volume up on that from a place of love and compassion. And then from there, I get to decide how I want to move forward in that situation, whether, it's how I communicate with a person or how I problem solve around it. Now you're operating from a place of love and compassion and being in the moment and being very thoughtful and mindful about the situation, as opposed to just reacting and saying something off the cuff of like, I can't believe you fucking just dropped this on me right now. You're fucking dead. And then you go down that rabbit hole. But if you're conscious about what the decisions you're going to make next, as your boss drops those 25 files on your desk, now you're taking control of and being responsible. You're giving yourself the ability to respond in that situation.
And not just reacting like it's a bear on the fence.
Exactly.
You just want to push the boss off the fence.
Exactly. Right. Whereas before you would have done that. Now you get to make a powerful decision on how you want to move forward.
Like you could you could find a solution with this new framework that you have and find a better solution to the situation. Got it.
As it relates to your North Star or your mission statement, right?
Well, I figure my North Star is I just want to be happy at my job, in my life, every day. And I know that things are going to rattle me once in a while. So how do I deal with those situations that rattle me?
Right, exactly.
So if I change this and practice this every day, then I get better at it.
You get better at it.
I get to listen to my ego and I get to listen to my higher self.
And then make an active decision on what you want to listen to.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
Intentional. You get to be more intentional. And when you're being more intentional in your ways of being, you're being more intentional about your mindset. And if you're more intentional about your mindset, then you're being more intentional. Like, is this moving towards my North Star, my mission statement? Is this in alignment with what it is that I have set out for myself as far as my goals and my ways of being?
So let's say you have a North Star, like before you even learned what you're teaching. I have my own North Star. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. Does this help define my North Star, change it a little bit?
It can.
Like I could redefine my North Star now?
Absolutely. Because you have new information, right? You have new information. When you have new information, then you allow yourself to make new decisions about how you may have held things previously. You may have a North Star, but if you are in practice of this new framework that's available for you, because you're exposing yourself to this new information, it would only be in your benefit to consider this information and see maybe how it enhances what it is your process is, or at least just gives you a new foundation of how to work through in making decisions for yourself and making choices for yourself. Right. And again, to your point, it is a practice. This is a framework that requires work. It's not just a framework that you look at and maybe understand conceptually and not do anything with it. That you're selling yourself short. You're not setting yourself up for success, because this information, in other words, here's what I'll say. If you have this framework to work with, I guarantee that if you are in practice of this framework, you will start to make better decisions for yourself and allow yourself to get towards your North Star, your mission statement, with a lot more ease, flow, and grace, and get there with a lot more effectiveness and efficiency.
Got it. So I got a question for you regarding people who've already had big goals when they were little kids. Let's say, for example, Tiger Woods. Sports comes up to me. His dad kind of groomed him. He was going to be a superstar golfer, right? He's going to change the landscape of golf. And he did, right? He won a bunch of championships. That was his North Star. Now, how would we use this framework into his North Star, or help someone like that? Because we've seen him fall from grace with, his own personal stuff that he's gone through. And, it's like, wow, what a big failure that he had there. But he kind of recovered from it. And he probably changed his North Star again. So I guess what I'm asking is, can this help someone like that? And another thing comes in mind is that, a lot of superstars like that have the big egos, the inflamed egos, but that's different from how you explain inflamed ego. Or is it the same?
It's the same. It's insane. It's insane. It's the same because it's a competition. So in competition, you are in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. More precisely, you're in that fight mode because you're competing. You're within that container, and that's fine. You're trying to win, so you do whatever it takes within the parameters of that container.
Within golf, within the golf, yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Like it's not like I'm going to win by any means necessary by taking this club and just wrapping it on somebody's knee. And you know what I mean? Like there are parameters. It keeps that ego in check in that container. What we also get to understand, it's okay to have that type of inflamed ego in that container. It's when it's outside of that container and it's prolonged over a period of time, that's where you can start to fall into bad patterns or bad behaviors or toxic behaviors.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I don't know Tiger Woods personally. I just watched him on TV all my life.
Right. So, and I mean, what I would also say to that too is, no matter what your mindset is, having a deeper understanding of how your ego plays into that, using this framework, can really inform your decisions and how you move forward, because now you have an understanding, a deeper understanding of where the thoughts and voices are coming from, and then you empower yourself to make an impactful decision.
Is there a simple example that you could come up with other than your stage fright or Tiger Woods? Is there like on a daily, like even like, do I make a left turn? Do I make a right turn? Do I, I hate traffic. Me personally, I don't like traffic. I try to avoid it as much as I can. And I look at Waze and Google Maps and all that stuff. So even when I make a mistake and I hit it, it's the same thing. I just hate sitting in traffic. You know what I mean? So on a daily, what does that look like? Like what kind of processes your brain,
Well,
the framework with all of this framework?
Here's what I would suggest for people to try out is really start to be self-aware. What are the things that are happening, conversations that are happening, or events that are happening? What is it that you're feeling? Is it a negative or positive feeling? If it's a positive feeling, there's not really much to do. It's just like, okay, it's not at anybody's expense. It's not at my own expense. This
feels
is fine.
good.
It feels good. It's fine.
Yeah.
But start to notice if a negative energy comes up, then that's a good indication of my inflamed ego is somehow at play. What is that? Where is that coming from? And then just make an active decision in that. It can be any everyday situation, whether you're in line at the grocery store and someone like steps in front of you, like, that's a negative energy. That person just cut in front of me. How can I now operate? Whereas before, when that person cut in front of me, I would have been like, bro, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. That's like road rage.
It's like road rage
in front of you. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you're being aware of that, and if part of your alignment is to be happy, if that's your mission statement or North Star, then whatever you decide to say, do, or act upon, you get to understand where is it that you're operating from. Am I going to respond to this person who cut in front of me with an inflamed ego? Or am I going to respond to this person who cut in front of me from my higher self?
Yeah. I could actually relate to the whole cutting in front of, because I used to do that to people. And then it happens to me. And now I have to reframe it to reclaim it. And now I say to myself, person's got to go somewhere fast.
For whatever reason.
Right? For whatever reason. Yeah. And then we end up at the stoplight at the same time. So,
but in that moment, you're operating from a place of love and compassion. You're being more compassionate about the situation, right?
Rather than blow up and chase him down the road and honk at him and, just like, okay.
Yeah. You're being more conscious about how you're going to respond. And that helps us navigate towards happiness.
I would actually think that getting in your car and driving and already reframing that with your new mindset could help you get to your place happier, get to your destination happier. Because if someone cuts you off, you're like, going nowhere fast. You know what I mean?
That's an example right there of you reframing on how you would approach a commute now. It's like, okay, now I'm operating from
at work, your boss.
Exactly. So again, it's a practice. For me, it's because I've been in practice a lot, it's starting to become more reflexive for me.
Yeah.
Right. So anytime I'm going into a situation where I experience a negative energy, immediately I go to, okay, that's an inflamed ego. Yeah. What is happening there? As soon as I do that, make that acknowledgement of that negative energy, that's me starting to down regulate. It's like, okay, I'm reassuring myself, there ain't no tiger that's coming out to kill me. Yeah. How do I want to proceed? Do I want to operate from that inflamed ego, or do I start turning up that volume on my higher self and start to reframe, to reclaim, or, some of the other tools to help me get moving towards listening to my higher self with a little bit more, more volume.
I just want to clear, maybe this could be our last question.
Okay.
Regarding when you say inflamed ego, I usually think of boastful ego, like a Donald Trump. Right? Like, boastful. And then a lot of people are like, oh, well, yeah, that's an inflamed ego. That's kind of like, is that the same thing what you're talking about? Inflamed, boastful.
Exactly.
Same thing.
Yeah. Boastful, being, bragging. Those are inflamed egos for sure.
Okay.
Inflamed egos for sure. Because it's like peacocking. Peacocking.
Yeah. I mean, when the peacock puts out their feathers.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm being boastful. I'm being boastful. I'm making myself big. Don't anybody mess with me. Because if you do, I'm going to, it's a way of avoiding threats.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to avoid threats by making yourself bigger, what you're actually doing is keeping yourself safe. It's your ego plus some sort of level of stress. They feel threatened, so they got to make themselves big. So that's an inflamed ego.
So that, and you were saying, just to go back, you were saying that in a container, that's okay, like a professional golfer or a tennis player or sports
Football,
star.
yeah, any kind of sports
any
thing
kind of
where
sports.
it's regulated, like it's okay, because that's where there's a social agreement on the parameters that we're working around. But it's outside of that container where it can end up being toxic. You see these people who have these big egos who think they're invincible. So they take that outside of that container, and they feel like they can get away with anything. And that can translate into abuse, domestic abuse, verbal abuse, physical
Bad marriage,
abuse,
basically. Bad relationship, bad marriage.
relationships, it can affect. And if you're doing that in one area of your life, there's probably a good chance you may be doing that in other areas of your life. Like, how are you treating other people? How are you treating the waitress who's busting her ass in providing you a service, and you're being braggadocious, or you're looking down at them, you know what I mean?
Or you're snapping your fingers. Hey,
or you're
hey.
snapping your finger. It's like, oh, bro, like that's an inflamed ego, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or just be a kind person. Just say, excuse me.
Yeah. And
right?
that would be an exercise of operating from your higher self.
All right, man. So with all of this framework, what are we going to do from here on out?
So what we'll do in the next few episodes is, now that we've provided the framework, we're going to go deeper into some of those tools that you can use within that framework. An example of that was that we kept referring to was reframe to reclaim. That was one of the tools that you can apply within that framework. And in the future episodes, that's what we'll do. We'll go deeper into those tools, see how you can use them and implement them within the framework.
Got it. All right, man. That's awesome. I think this was a great episode.
Yeah.
Kind of do a summary of everything that we've learned so far. But you know what I got to ask you?
What's that?
I need to hear another quote.
Oh, yes, a quote. I do have a quote. Let me pull this up. And I think this quote really demonstrates what we were talking about today. If you do what is easy, your life will be hard. If you do what is hard, your life will be easy.
Oh man, now you got me thinking again.
Right? It's deep stuff. And
I think we'll start putting quotes in the show more link so people could see it.
Yeah. And then maybe what we could even do as well is maybe we'll talk about these quotes in deeper depth and see how those quotes really can have deeper insight within the framework. We can do that too.
Definitely. All right. I got to hear that.
Oh, I think that was a who dang.
Who dang.
Who dang.
There you go, man.
There it is.
So if you like what you hear, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment, and
make sure you share. And make sure you share. And then leave a comment. Tell us what your thoughts are about mindset, how maybe it affected your mindset, or if this resonated for you. Just type in, yes, this resonated for me. We would love to have the engagement.
All right. Awesome. See you guys next week.
Thank you, guys.